The sound of par, first his voice. You serve my wife under this roof or you leave my house. It wasn't yet. It was issued like an order on a parade ground, the kind of voice that makes even grown men stand straighter. But I wasn't a captain anymore. I stood under N Province, dragged bleeding soldiers through dust and smoke. I'd been shouted at by men who commanded fleets. None of them made my pulse rise like my father did in that kitchen. The plate fragmented between us. Roast beef still steaming, my stepmother Elaine stood by the counter, wide-eyed, clutching her wine glass like a trophy. My father didn't look at her. He looked at me, square, cold, certain. If you live here, you live by my rules. She's your superior under this roof. The words landed harder than any bullet. I didn't argue. I just nodded, 11, walked upstairs, folded my clothes into the same duffel that had been through 3 deployments, zipped it, and came down without a sound. He followed me to the doorway but didn't move to stop me. When I stepped off the porch, the night air hit like salt in an open wound. That was 2 weeks ago. Now my phone lights up beside the motel lamp, 48 missed calls from home. When I first came back from the Navy, I thought maybe distance would fix things. I'd been gone nearly 8 years. Afghanistan, Bahrain, Djibouti, names my father never wanted to hear. He'd served 2 30 years Air Force. He called sailors floaters and women in uniform publicity when I made officer. He sent a 2-word email, be careful. After Mom died, he remarried quick. Elaine was half his age, polished, the type who called him Colonel at dinner. I tried to be polite, but every conversation turned into an inspection, my posture, my tone, my lack of feminine grace. The last straw came the night she told me to set the table for her book club like a good daughter should. I laughed. My father didn't. That night became the ultimatum. Drove out of Arlington before midnight, highway stretching, endless and silver under the rain. The wipers beat time with my heartbeat. Somewhere near Fredericksburg, I pulled over at a diner, ordered black coffee, and at the American flag flapping on the pole outside, I'd saluted that flag 1,000 times, but never felt lonely or under it than I did then. Named car asked where I was headed. Norfolk, I said. Military. She guessed. Used to be. She poured another cup without charging me. 11. It's in your blood. It never leaves. I slept in the car behind the diner till dawn, then drove to a small apartment complex near the Naval Pier. The landlord was a Vietnam vet when I mentioned I'd served. He gave me a discount and a firm handshake. The walls were thin, the fridge hum, but it was mine. Unpacked the essentials, uniform, medals, a photo of Mom. Her smile in that picture calm, knowing always studied me. On the second morning, I went for a run along the waterfront. The air smelled like diesel and salt. My knees still twitched from the shrapnel injury, but motion felt like sanity. Fishermen nodded as I passed. Civilians didn't look twice. For 11, I wasn't Commander Holdbrook. I was just another woman trying to breathe. The third day, I found work at the local Veteran Outreach Center, temporary contract. The pay didn't matter. Purpose did. They needed someone to coordinate transport for injured vets, file benefit paperwork, calling back. I knew that by the first vet I helped was a Marine named Trudell, missing 2 fingers and most of his hope. No one gives a damn 11, you're out. I told him, that's not true. I do, and I meant it. At night, I earned my Navy jacket out of habit, not because I had anywhere to wear it, just to remember the rhythm of precision. My father used to say, order is how we survive chaos. I believed him. Once I wondered just become his armor against feelings he couldn't face. A week later, I got an email from a mutual friend of his, an old Air Force buddy. Saw your dad last weekend. Looked tired. Guess that new wife's running a ragged. I deleted it. Pride is hereditary, I thought. But the silence hurt more than the insult ever had. Sometimes I'd catch myself replaying that last scene. His eyes, the way they never softened, the way he didn't flinch as I walked out. Part of me wanted to believe he'd call to apologize. Another part knew better. Too many men like him built entire worlds on control, terrified of cracks in the armor. On the 10th night, the storm came in hard from the Atlantic. The apartment windows rat. I sat on the floor, knees drone, listening to the wind. Towel, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. Then again. Then again. By the time it stopped, I counted 48 missed calls. For a long moment, I stared at the screen. 48. The man who 11 swore he'd never begged the father, who told me to leave his house, now he was calling again and again, into the dark. I didn't pick up. Not yet. Because sometimes silence isn't revenge, it's preparation. By morning, the storm had passed. The parking lot outside my window glistened with puddles that mirrored a washed-out sky. My phone still blinked on the nightstand, a silent pulse of unanswered calls. I stared at it for a long time before powering it off. I told myself I needed rest, but truthfully, I just wasn't ready to hear his voice, if it was even him. I made coffee, the Navy way, strong, bitter, no sugar, and opened the blinds. The scent of the harbor drifted in, salt and oil mixed with sea chatter out there. The ships stood like giants, gray and different. The Navy taught me that kind of stillness, how to stand calm when everything else moved. But it never taught me how to be a daughter. I tried to go about my day. I drove to the Veteran Outreach Center early, unlocked the doors, and started sorting case files before anyone else arrived. It was quiet work, but it filled the silence. The center was housed in an old municipal building near downtown Norfolk. Its walls lined with faded posters, honor never retire, services forever. Slogans civilians walked past, but veterans glint by noon. The first clients arrived. A Gulf War vet needing help with disability paperwork, a young sailor who couldn't stop shaking long enough to sign a form. I moved from desk to desk like I used to move through field triage, steady hands, even voice, helping others made the eye in my chest dull. Around lunch, the center's director, Mrs. Dalton, appeared in my doorway. She carried 2 sandwiches and a look that meant she'd been running full throttle since day one, she said, setting 1 sandwich on my desk. "Aisles, ma'am," I answered. She smiled. "Oh, maybe you're out running something." I didn't answer. The truth sat heavy in my throat. After work, I walked along the pier. The air was crisp, the sun bleeding orange into the bay. I watched a Navy destroyer ease toward the horizon, its engines humby. The sight, something old in me, discipline, belonging, ache. I missed the structure of command, the unspoken language between people who understood sacrifice. I sat on a bench and pulled out a letter I'd been avoiding. It was from the Navy Medical Board, dated 3 months earlier. "You are hereby cleared for limited active status upon completion of physical therapy." I traced the signature line with my thumb. I could go back if I wanted, but did I? A gull landed near my boots, tilting its head like it was waiting for an answer. "Yeah," I muttered. "Neither." When I got home, the apartment felt smaller than usual. I made dinner, rice, eggs, whatever was left, and ate by the window. The quiet used to comfort me. Now it just echoed. I found myself checking my phone again. Still off, still safe. That night, I dreamed of my father's kitchen, the one I'd walked out of, the clock on the wall ticking, his jaw clenched, Elaine's perfume heavy in the air. In the dream, I wasn't leaving. I was 10 years old again, standing at attention while he inspected my room. Corners of he used to borrow soldiers. Worth is in the corners I'd press my blanket tighter, hoping he'd see the effort. He never did. When I woke, the dream lingered like humidity. I thought about Mom, how she used to slip notes into my lunchbox when I was a kid. Be kind, even when it's hard. She died before she could see what I became. Sometimes I wondered if she would have approved of the woman I was. disciplined, guarded, half made of steel. I showered, pulled my hair into a tight bun, and put on jeans instead of uniform blues. Civilians respected medals, but feared them too. Sometimes blending in was easier. At the center, Mrs. Dalton handed me a new case file, Holbrook, Richer. For a moment, I thought my heart stopped. Then I saw it wasn't him. Different Richard, Vietnam vet, paralyzed waist down, but the name still shook something loose. By mid-afternoon, I was knee-deep in transport logistics when my phone, now powered back on, buzzed against the desk. Unknown number. I let it ring out. Then a voicemail notification popped up. I hesitated before listening. A woman's voice, quivering. Miss Holbrook, this is Linda from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm trying to, regarding your father, Colonel Richard Holbrook. He's been admitted since last night. Please call us back as soon as possible. Tilted, my first thought wasn't what happened, it was where's. I replayed the message twice, then set the phone down. My hands were steady, but inside something cracked open. He'd made his choice. He'd chosen her, and now she was nowhere to be found. Mrs. Dalton must have seen my face from the hallway. Everything all right? She asked. I swallowed. Just family business. She nodded slowly, the hardest. Without the highway signs blurred, Newport News, Hampton, then the exit for Arlington, my mind spun through 1,000 possibilities. Heart attack, fall accident. I kept seeing his face that night, cold and certain, the kind of man who thought vulnerability was a disease. By the time I reached St. Mary's, the parking lot lights flickered against the wet pavement. Sat in the car a long time, gripping the steering wheel, my uniform jacket folded neatly beside me. I didn't know what waited inside. Guilt, anger, maybe both. When I finally stepped through the automatic doors, the scent of antiseptic hit me like a flashback. Hospitals, always like command centers, controlled chaos, measured in seconds. The nurse at the desk recognized the name immediately. Colonel Holbrook. He's stable, but you should talk to the doctor. The nurse? No, we haven't been able to reach. Of course not. And the ICU machines. Softly around him. He looked smaller than I remembered, skin pale against the hospital sheet. The man who 11 filled every room, now barely filled the bed. I stood there a while. Arm fed the silence between us, heavier than oxygen. Finally, I whisper, "You always said soldiers don't win. Guess you forgot to add fathers to that list." He didn't. I pulled the chair closer and said, for the first time since leaving his house, I felt something other than anger. Pity, maybe, or recognition. The monitor beat steady. I realized my hands were trembling. Then his eyes opened slow on. Nah, his rasp gone. Elaine took everything. I leaned back exhaling. The irony hit sharp and clean. The woman I had been told to serve had vanished at the first sign of trouble. I didn't smile, not yet. Some victories don't come with celebration. They come with quiet clarity. The morning after I found him, I sat by the window in his hospital room, the blinds half drawn, the world's outside still gray with dawn. The monitors beeped in rhythm with his shallow breathing. He was asleep again, exhausted after the doctors told him the truth, that Elaine had emptied his accounts, sold his car, and disappeared. When I first heard it, I didn't say a word. I'd learned long ago that silence cuts deeper than accusation. The doctor's voice was careful. He'll recover physically, emotionally. That's on you two. You two. I almost laughed. We hadn't been to Parksa for a long time. When he woke again later that morning, he refused breakfast, refused the TV, refused to talk. I offered coffee. He ignored it. Typical. Even bedridden, he clung to control like oxygen. Finally, I said, "The hospital needs a point of contact. I'll handle it. He frowned. You don't have to stay. He didn't look at me, but I caught the flicker in his eyes. Shame, quiet, and unfamiliar. I'd seen soldiers crumble under less. By noon, I met with the case manager. The numbers were ugly. His pension account, 0. Credit cards, maxed. House in default. Utilities unpaid. Elaine had played him with precision. The woman didn't just take his money, she gutted his pride. The manager asked gently, "Do you want us to call Adult Protective Services?" I shook my head. "He's not a victim. He's a veteran. We'll handle it." The words felt heavier than they sounded. When I returned to his room, he was staring at the ceiling. "You shouldn't have come," he mewed. "I didn't come for you," I said. "The hospital called. I respond to calls." He smirked. "Weak, but familiar still. Still the soldier, still breathing," I replied. 2 days later, I drove to his house to collect some of his things. The key still worked. The moment I stepped inside, the air felt wrong, like a stranger's home. Curtains drawn, lights off, the smell of perfume thick enough to choke on. Elaine's touch was everywhere. Silk pillows, gold-trimmed frames, new china still in boxes, but in the corner near the fireplace, his old Air Force trunk. One photo caught my eye, my parents on their wedding day. Her in white lace, him in uniform. I picked it up, brushed off the dust. The glass had cracked right through their joined hands. Something in me tightened. In the kitchen, the cabinets were nearly empty, except for a stack of unpaid bills and a pink envelope labeled Final on the counter. A single note in Elaine's handwriting. "You should have listened to me, Richard. Pride doesn't pay bills." No signature, no goodbye, just contempt. I folded the note 11 and slipped it into my jacket, not as evidence, as a reminder. When I left, I locked the door behind me, though there was nothing left to protect. Back at the hospital, I found him awake, reading a Bible. Someone from the church had dropped off. I hadn't seen him touch a Bible in years. I set a duffel bag on the chair. "Your clothes, papers." He nodded toward the bag. "Find her?" "No," I said, "but I found what she left behind." He didn't ask what that meant. Maybe he didn't want to know for a while. We sat in silence. The hum of machines filled the space where words should have been. Then he said quietly, "You were right." I looked at him. "About what? About her?" I shook my head. "No, Dad. I wasn't right. I just stopped trying to prove you wrong." He swallowed hard, eyes on the window. "You sound like your mother." That hit harder than I expected. Later that night, I called the Veteran Outreach Center. Mrs. Dalton answered on the second ring. "You all right, Avery?" I hesitated to find all right. She chuckled softly. "That bad, huh?" "Worse," I said. "He's broke, humiliated, and pretending it's just a tactical setback." "That's men like him," she said. "They think emotion is an ambush, ya high mar, and surrender shame." Mrs. Dalton quiet. "You staying, aren't you?" I stared at the sterile walls, the blinking monitors, his sleeping silhouette. "For now." "Good," she said. "He needs someone who knows how to rebuild from rubble." I didn't tell her that I wasn't sure if she meant him or me. Over the next few days, I became his unofficial caretaker, checked vitals, handled insurance, fielded endless calls from creditors. When nurses thanked me for being such a good daughter, I didn't correct them. Inside, I felt like an imposter. One evening, I came in to find him watching the evening news, a military ceremony, young cads saluting. His eyes followed the screen. "Remember when you said I'd never wear those colors?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. The anchor's voice on TV announced a promotion for a female officer. "Father has." He noted 11 took me too long to see it. That might have been the closest thing to an apology I was ever going to get. When he was discharged, a week later, I drove him home. The house looked even emptier than before. He paused in the doorway, staring at the bare walls, then turned to me. "You don't have to stay," he said again. "I know," I replied, "but you shouldn't be alone." He exhaled. "You sound just like your mother. She'd have stayed too," I said. He gave a short nod, then stepped inside. I followed. The living room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. He walked over to his old trunk, lifted one of his medals, and placed it carefully on the mantel. "Funny," he said softly. "These used to mean something." "They still do," I told him. "You just forgot." He didn't reply, but his hand lingered on the medal. Watching the light catch the bronze edges for the first time, the silence between us didn't feel like punishment. It felt like possibility. The morning after I brought Dad home, I woke to the sound of the old clock ticking in his hallway, the same one Mom used to polish every Sunday. It was nearly 6 a.m. He was already up, sitting at the kitchen table, dressed in slacks and a pressed shirt, as if nothing had changed, but everything had. His coffee mug sat untouched. He wasn't reading, just staring at the window. I poured myself a cup and joined him. "Hospital says you need rest," I said. He nodded absently. "Rest is for the retired." "You are retired," I reminded him. He looked up, then eyes still sharp even behind fatigue. "Maybe, but I'll be damned if I die in a chair." That was the man I knew, stubborn to the bone. Pride was his oxygen. Let him sit in it while I made breakfast. He ate half a slice of toast, then went quiet again. Later that day, I drove back to the Veterans Center. It felt good to step into a place where service still meant something. Mrs. Dalton was at her desk sorting through donation letters. "Didn't expect you back so soon," she said. "Needed to breathe," I replied. She studied my face for a second. "You've got your father's job at your mother's eyes. That combination scares people." Goodbye mid-morning, the center was buzzing. Veterans came in for counseling, benefits checks, and a hot meal. The building always smelled like burnt coffee and hope. I slipped into my office, booted up my computer, and started catching up on case files. That's when Marcus Hawk Hill walked in. 6'4", bald, arms tattooed with coordinates of every battlefield we'd ever crossed together. He was a SEAL like me, older by 10 years, quieter by nature. He leaned against the doorframe grinning. "Heard the Navy finally let you go?" he said. "Temporarily," I corrected. "They'll drag me back when they realize no one else color codes the supply manifests. Still fighting chaos with spreadsheets?" We caught no time had passed. Deployment stories, jokes that only made sense to those who'd been there, but when he mentioned my father, the humor dread. "I heard about what happened," he said, carefully. "Word travels fast." Elaine always felt off. Some people hide behind charm, the way we hide behind arm. I nodded. She didn't just rob him, she dismantled him. He looked at me for a long second. "I'm fine," I said. "You're lying like an officer again." That afternoon, we hosted a small workshop for younger veterans. It was supposed to be about leadership after service, but half the attendees were just looking for connection. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't use slides or notes. I just stood at the front of the room and said, "Leadership doesn't end when the uniform comes off. It begins when nobody has to salute you anymore." They listened, really listened. One kid, barely 25, raised his hand and asked, "Ma'am, what do you do when your own family stops seeing you as someone worth respecting?" For a moment, I froze. Then I answered, "You remember that respect isn't a gift, it's a mirror. You can't make someone look, but you can keep it clean until they do." Afterward, Mrs. Dalton whispered, "You should write that down." I didn't. Some truths belonged to the moment. By evening, my phone buzzed again, a missed call from the house. I called back. No answer. Me stomach nodded. I grabbed my coat and drove home. When I walked in, Dad was in the garage, sitting in his old work chair, surrounded by half-disassembled tools. He looked smaller under the fluorescent light. "Everything okay?" I asked. He nodded, trying to fix the mower. Engine's been stalling, Dad. You just had a mild heart attack. He shrugged. It's just a motor. Needs fuel, air, spark, same as people. Sighed, then crouched beside him. Except people break different. He didn't respond. He just handed me a wrench. I helped him tighten a bolt. The silence between us, mechanical, rhythmic, almost peaceful. When we finished, he sat back, breathing hard. You know, he said quietly, when Elaine moved in, she wanted me to sell all this, said it made the garage look like a junkyard. I wiped grease from my hands. Guess that's the difference between junk and history. He chuckled, the sound I hadn't heard in years. The next day, I told him I had to go back to work. He didn't object. You have duties, he said, as if giving me permission. I paused at the door. You'll be all right. He gestured to the TV remote. Got my orders for the day, CNN and bad coffee. When I got to the center, Marcus was waiting with 2 cups of coffee and a stack of files. Got a few new vets for intake, figured you'd want the tougher ones. He grinned when I raised an eyebrow. You're predictable, I said. He noted. So are you. Between appointments? He asked. How my father was doing. Alive, I said. Angry at the world, but too proud to admit his hurt. Marcus Stant. You ever think maybe he's more like you than you want to believe? I gave a soft laugh. That's the problem. That night, back home, I caught him watching an old Navy documentary, carrier decksmen saluting jets taking off. His eyes followed the planes as if they were ghosts. Miss it? I asked. He didn't turn. You never stopped missing the sound of purpose. I stood in the doorway. You could come by the center sometime. There's a group for retired officers. He waved me off. Those things are for people who need talking. I'm fine. Almost pushed, but something in his tone stopped me. He wasn't ready to face other men who'd seen him fall. Instead, I sat with him. The announcer on TV spoke about courage under fire. My father murmured, courage under shame's harder. I glanced at him. Maybe, but recovery is still a mission, Dad. You can't abandon it. He nodded, slowly, eyes wet but refusing to blink when the show ended. He surprised me. You still wear your uniform sometimes? I said. He looked down at his hands. Don't let anyone take that from you, not even me. It was the closest thing to forgiveness I'd ever heard from him, or maybe it was permission. That night after he went to bed, I stood in the garage again among his tools, metals, dust. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was standing in a stranger's house. I felt like I'd come home, not because he asked, but because I chose to. By the following week, the balance between us had settled into something almost civil. He brewed the morning coffee, I handled the mail, and made sure he took his medication. It wasn't affection yet, but it was peace. By truce, the kind soldiers make when they're too tired to keep fighting. That peace shattered with a single phone call. It was Thursday evening, a soft Virginia sunset stretching across the living room walls. Ironed one of his old shirts when the phone rang. He reached for it before I could voice. Firm, again, back in command mode. Holdbrook residence. Then his expression changed. Confusion, then disbelief. He hung up without a word. Who was it? I asked. He didn't answer right away. His hand trembled slightly as he placed the receiver down. They wanted to confirm the closing date. Closing date for what? He looked at me ashamed. The house. Froze, you sold the house. He swallowed hard. Elaine did before she left. The walls seemed to tilt. I'd known she'd stolen money, but this was surgical cruelty. How soon? I asked. End of the month. That's 2 weeks. He stared at the floor. She forged my signature. I didn't want to admit it. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I set the iron down. The hiss of steam filled the silence like a fuse burning. Dad, I said quietly. This isn't about her anymore. It's about you, not trusting anyone who isn't wearing a uniform. He winced, but didn't deny it. The next morning, I drove to the bank myself. The clerk, a polite woman in her 40s, looked uneasy when I showed my ID. Lieutenant Commander Holbrook, she read softly. We spoke with your father earlier. Yeah, I said he didn't authorize that sale. She hesitated. The paperwork looked legitimate. We only caught the discrepancy because of a flagged withdrawal. She slid a copy of the document toward me. I saw his forged signature, neat, deliberate, convincing. I'll need that file, I said. I can't release it without a subpoena. I leaned closer. Then pretend you didn't see me take a photo. She looked at me, then down at the paper, and didn't stop me. When I got home, he was in the garage again, sitting in the same chair, a wrench in his hand, but no project in sight. You went to the bank. He said someone had to. He sighed, staring at the floor. I trained men to spot deception from a mile away, didn't see it sitting across from me every night. His voice cracked, it the sound of a man who'd never allowed himself to break. You loved her, I said softly. I loved what I thought she was structured calm order, but it was all theater. Guess I was the last to realize the play ended months ago. I didn't reply. Some wounds don't need bandages, they just need acknowledgement. Over the next few days, he grew quieter. He watched TV with the volume low, as if noise were too much. When I came home from the center, he'd be sitting in the same spot, the same cup of coffee gone cold beside him. On Sunday, I suggested church, not for religion, but for routine. The sanctuary was nearly empty, just a handful of retirees and widows. When the hymn began, he didn't singing. He just stared at the flag near the pulpit. Afterward, a woman approached him, an old friend of my mother's. She hugged me first, turned to him, Richard. He managed a stiff smile, trying to her eyes. The Lane stopped by the church months ago, said you were selling the place to move south. That did it. His face drained of color, she said. What she mentioned? Florida? Some kind of new start. He turned away, jaw tight. On the drive home, he didn't speak. That night, I found him sitting in the dark, the television off. The house was too still. You okay? I asked. He didn't move. Do you know what it feels like to command men through war zones only to be out by theme? Yeah, different battlefield, same result, he chuckled bitterly. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's human. He looked up, eyes sharp again. Don't patronize me. I'm not, I said quietly. I'm reminding you that being wrong doesn't make you weak. He slammed his fist on the table, the sound sharp. Weakness got me here. I didn't flinch. No pride did the words hung dara and dangerous for a long time. He said nothing. Then his shoulder sagged. Maybe you're right. It was the first time he'd ever said those words to me. I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled. 2 nights later, the police called. They'd found Elaine's car abandoned outside a motel in Maryland. No sign of her inside. A hotel key card, 2 empty wine bottles, and a purse with his name still on an old checkbook. Fraud investigation was ongoing. I told him over breakfast. He didn't react, just saint. His coffee. Guess that's closure, he said. Closure's not justice, I replied. Justice is overrated, he muttered. It doesn't give you back your house. I reached across the table, touched his hand. You've still got one. He looked up, confused. This house isn't sold yet. I spoke with the bank. They're freezing the transaction until we file charges. His eyes. You did that. That's what daughters do when their fathers forget they. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. That evening, he sat beside me on the porch as the sun dipped low. You ever regret joining the Navy? He asked. Not 11. Even with everything it cost you, especially because of it, I said. It taught me how to survive, men like you. He laughed, the sound breaking through the air like sunlight after rain then. He turned serious. I don't deserve this, he said. Maybe not, I replied, but you're getting it anyway. He nodded slowly. Your mother would have liked seeing this. Maybe she's watching, I said. He smiled faintly. Then I hope she's proud of the both of us. That was the first night we watched the sunset together in years, not as enemies, not as soldiers, but as two broken people trying to rebuild. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the first spark of it. The next morning, the air smelled like rain. I woke early, half expecting to find Dad in the garage again, tinkering with something that didn't need fixing. But he was at the kitchen table, dressed in his old Air Force jacket, staring at an envelope on the table. What's that? I asked, still half asleep. He tapped it. 11, foreclosure notice. Came yesterday. I sighed. They're still processing it. We froze the transaction. He looked up at me with tired eyes. I'm not talking about the bank. I'm talking about my life, Avery. I don't even recognize it anymore. There, it was not anger, not pride, but exhaustion. I poured coffee for both of us. We sat in silence for a while, two soldiers waiting for orders that wouldn't come. Dad, I said finally, you built everything on control. When that broke, you thought you broke too. He stared at the window. What am I supposed to build on now? I said it softly. People. He didn't answer, but I saw the flicker of understanding, or maybe disbelief, cross his face. At the center, my Dalton handed me a new intake form. We got a call from St. Mary's, she said. Colonel Holbrook's being released for outpatient rehab. I already know, I said. Her brow rose. So you are his ride, apparently. I'm a full-time chauffeur now. She smiled gently. You could do worse than taking care of the man who raised you. I didn't tell her. He didn't raise me. The Navy did. That afternoon, I drove back to the hospital to pick him up. He sat in a wheelchair near the exit, duff his feet. He looked smaller than ever, but his posture was perfect, chin high, back. Some things never changed. You ready? I asked. Let's go. The ride home quiet until we hit the rain. The rain started again, soft and steady. Turned toward the window and said, I used to think forgiveness was weakness, and now he watched the wipers sweep. Now I think maybe it's the only kind of strength I've never learned. I didn't reply. Some words don't need an echo. They just need air. At home, I helped him to the couch and started a pot of coffee. He leaned back, hands clasped. Elaine called 11 before she disappeared. He said suddenly, I didn't tell you. He shrugged. Pride, I guess. She asked me to wire her money, said she was in trouble. I told her to go to hell. Good. He looked at me almost pleading. Was it? Yes, I said firmly. You finally stopped serving the wrong person. He let out a slow breath. Maybe I served the wrong things my whole life. For a long time, neither of them finished brewing, and the smell warm, familiar. I poured cups, handed him one. You can start again, I said. He stared at the mug like it was a medal he didn't deserve. At my age, at any age, I said. You start by standing. He looked at me, a faint smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. You sound like a commander. I learned from the best, I said. Then, after a pause, even if he forgot how to follow his own advice. That evening, Market stopped by the house. He brought dinner barbecue from a roadside joint, smoky and perfect. He shook Dad's hand with that quiet, unspoken respect soldiers give one another. Sir, he said simply. Son, Dad replied, nodding. 11. We ate in the living room, the TV playing quietly in the background. After dinner, Marcus mentioned a fundraiser the center was hosting for veteran families, and idea Mrs. Dalton had been pushing for months. We could use a speaker, he said. Someone who's been through it, someone people listen to. He looked at me, but Dad spoke first. She'd be perfect. I blinked. Me? He nodded. You've seen both sides, command and collapse. I stared at him surprised. And what about you? I'll attend, he said with a smirk, but I'm not photogenic anymore. That was the closest we'd come to joking in years. The following weekend, I took him to his first therapy session. The therapist, a young woman named Dr. Lynn, greeted him warmly. "We'll take it slow, Colonel," she said. "Stephen, don't call me that. I'm just Richard now." She smiled. "Then we'll take it slow, Richard." I sat in the waiting room while he went in. When he came out, his face looked softer. Not lighter, but like something inside had unclenched. "How was it?" I asked. Granted, she asked too many questions. That's her job. She said I should try writing a letter to Elaine for closure. Are you going to? He looked at me, then away. Maybe to your mother first. That hit like a quiet explosion. No sound, just impact. That night, I caught him in the garage again, sitting by the old trunk. Held a faded photo of Mom, the one from their first deployment together. Her hair tied back, his uniform crisp, both of them smiling. He didn't hear me at first. "She would have liked you," he said softly. "She raised me." He nodded, still looking at the photo. "I used to tell her that I'd never lose control," she said. "One day, I'd meet someone who'd teach me what real control looked like." Guess she was right. Beside him, she usually was. He reached into the trunk and pulled out a small box. Inside were his medals, Brown Star, Distinguished Service, Years of Service pins. He handed it to me. "These should have gone to your brother," he said quietly. "If I had one." I laughed softly. "Guess you got stuck with a daughter instead." "Guess I did," he said, smiling, "and I'm grateful for it." I felt my throat tighten. I hadn't heard him say grateful in years. As we closed the garage, he said something I'll never forget. "You know, I used to think being a soldier meant protecting everyone, but I never realized you were protecting me all along." I turned to him, blinking back the sting in my eyes. "We protect what's worth saving, Dad." He nodded slowly, looking at me with something new. Respect, maybe even pride. That night, when I turned off the lights, I paused by his door. He was already asleep. The photo of Mom on the nightstand beside him. For the first time, his face looked peaceful. I whispered into the dark, "Welcome home." By mid-June, the humidity had settled over Virginia like a blanket. You couldn't kick off. The cicada screamed outside, and inside, Dad started walking again. Slower than before, but proud, determined. Every morning, he shuffled from the kitchen to the porch, saluting the flag that hung in the air. Catch, to sometimes not just murmur name of men he served with the past, was his way of staying in, but the future was coming of us. That Monday, the detective from the fraud unit called Lieutenant Commander Holbrook. "We've located the suspect, Elaine Porter." Holbrook, the name hung like smoke. "Where?" I asked. "Savannah, Georgia. She's been arrested for financial fraud and identity theft across 3 states. I let out a slow breath. "You'll need my father's statement. That's why I'm calling," he said. "She's requested a plea meeting with him present." For a second, I thought I missed her. She wants to see him. "Yes, ma'am. She says she'll only cooperate if she can speak to Colonel Holbrook face to face." When I told him, he didn't react right away. He just looked out the window, "Savannah," he said finally. "Your mother loved that city." "That's not the point," I said. "You don't owe her anything." He nodded slowly. "Maybe not, but maybe I owe myself the truth." 2 days later, we drove south. Marcus insisted on coming along, said it wasn't good for 2 Holbrooks to be in the same car with a shared temper. The drive was long, hours of pine forest and old moat, and I could feel Dad rehearsing every word he'd say. I didn't try to stop him. Some things have to leave the body before they hit it. We reached the courthouse the next morning. Elaine was already there, Thinner, makeup. When she saw him, her lip, she said softly. He didn't answer. He stood straight, hands behind his back, like he was back on inspection duty. The attorney started the formalities, but she cut in. I didn't mean to hurt you. Dad's jaw tightened. You meant to use me. Tears welled in her eyes. I loved you. He shook his head. You loved the pension, the way my name looked on the mailbox. Please, I'm not the monster you think I am. No, you made me forget who I was and who my daughter is. I hadn't expected him to say that. My throat went tight, Elaine, so quiet words tumble. I was scared. I wanted security. You stole it from the one person who earned it, he said. The judge signaled for the bailiff to escort her out. As she passed, she turned to him one last time. I'm sorry. He didn't answer, just lifted his chin and said quietly, So am I. On the drive back, he didn't speak until we hit the North Carolina line. Then, staring straight ahead, he said, I thought confronting her would fix something, but all I feel is empty. That's what happens after war, i.e., the silence comes, and you realize peace is just quiet loss. He looked at me, then, eyes heavy with regret. I used to think you were too soft for service. Turns out, you are the only real soldier left in this family. I smiled. You're learning, Colonel. He gave a low laugh. Don't push it. When we got back home, the house smelled of rain again. I opened the windows while he disappeared into the garage. I found him later sitting by the workbench polishing an old plaque. Colonel Richard Holbrook, Commanding Officer, 317th Airlift Squadron, he said without looking up. You should take over the Veterans Fundraiser next week. They'll listen to you more than they ever did me. Why me? Because you speak like a leader. He said, and because you know how to forgive. Beside him, folded my arms. I'm still learning that part. So am I. The day of the fundraiser arrived, hot and bright. The community hall was packed with veterans, families, reporters, flags everywhere. The kind of event he used to command, and now watched from the side. When it was my turn to speak, I took to the podium. My hands didn't shake. Years of service had burned that reflex out of me. I used to believe honor was something you proved in uniform, I began, but it's not. It's what you do when the uniform's gone, when no one's saluting, when you've been forgotten and you still choose to stand. People leaned forward, listening. I scanned the crowd and found Dad near the back, standing tall despite the cane. I learned that from my father, I said, a man who taught me discipline, then forgot his own until he found it again the hard way. Honor isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up, and sometimes letting someone else help you do it. There was silence when I finished, then applause, slow, building, real. When I stepped off the stage, Dad was waiting by the side aisle. He didn't speak. He just saluted. For a moment, everything blurred. The crowd, the noise, the between us. I returned the hand, steady, eyes wet. It wasn't ceremony. It was homecoming. That night back at the house, he sat on the porch as the sun set, the cane resting across his knees. Your speech was good, he said quietly. You crying was better, I teased. He laughed softly. Maybe so then. He looked at me, really looked. You ever think forgiveness is contagious? I think pride is too, I said. But one of them heals. He smiled, that slow, tired human smile I hadn't seen since I was a kid. You're right. 11. He didn't add anything after that. No correction, no rank, no lesson, just peace. The fundraiser changed everything. In one evening, my father went from being the man the town pitied to the man people nodded to. Again, not out of fear, but out of respect. After the event, the local news ran a small story about the Holbrook family service legacy. The headline made me cringe, but I saw what it did to him. For the first time in years, he didn't change the subject when people mentioned my name. He said it with pride. Still, I could tell the applause had left something unsettled inside him. Redemption is heavy. It demands a reckoning with the silence that came before. A week later, I found him sitting on the porch before dawn, coffee steaming in his hand, staring at the horizon. "You up early," I said. He smiled faintly. Old pilots never sleep late. "We wait for light." I sat beside him. "What are you waiting for now?" He didn't answer right away. Then, a chance to make things right. He turned to me serious. "You think the men I commanded ever forgave me for the way I ran them?" "They didn't need to," I said. "They understood you were hard because the world was harder." He nodded slowly. "You sound like someone who's had to command too." "I did," I said, "but I learned something you didn't." "What's that?" "You can't lead anyone you don't respect, and you can't respect anyone you don't understand." He didn't argue. He just looked out over the field, the morning light softening his features for 11. He looked human that afternoon. Mrs. Dalton called Colonel Holbrook. "Left something at the center," she said. "Looks official." We drove together. When we walked in, the veterans greeted him like one of their own. Nods, firm handshakes, quiet respect. For the first time, he didn't deflect it. On the bulletin board near the lobby was a notice: Annual Veterans Recognition Ceremony. Guest of Honor, Commander Avery Holbrook. He stared at it for a long time. "They picked you. They picked us." I corrected. Mrs. Dalton came over smiling. "We're honoring both of you this year. Service doesn't end with a retirement date." Dad cleared his throat. "I'm not much for speeches anymore." "You won't have to speak," she said. "Just stand." He looked at me half grinning. "You think I can manage that?" I nodded. "You stood for worse." The night of the ceremony, the community hall was packed again. Veterans in their uniforms, families holding small flags, kids fidgeting and folding chairs. The smell of coffee and floor wax mingled with old brass polish. When they called my name, I stood, walked to the front, accepted the plaque with a handshake. But when they called his something, unexpected happened. Every veteran in the room stood up one by one. Then, all at 11, they saluted the man. The man beside me froze. His eyes widened. Then Glenn. He'd been saluted thousands of times in his career, but never like this. Not after disgrace, not after forgiveness. He hesitated, trembling slightly, then straightened his back, lifted his right hand, and returned the salute. The applause was quiet but thunderous in meaning. It wasn't for rank. It was for redemption. After the ceremony, he waited until the crowd thronged. "You ever think about how we got here?" he asked. "All the time," I said. "I nearly lost you." "You did," I said softly. "But you found me when you stopped trying to command me." He chuckled, voice rough. "Guest leadership takes more humility than I thought it always did," I said. We walked out together into the cool evening air. The parking lot lights reflected off the polished plaques. We carried. He stopped beside the flagpole. "When I first saluted you," he said, "it was instinct. Tonight it was respect." I swallowed hard. "That's all I ever wanted." He smiled. "Then, I guess, we finally even." A few weeks later, I got a call from the regional VA office. They heard about our story. The estranged recon, they wanted us to speak at a national conference in D.C. When I told him, he looked terrified. Public speaking isn't my thing anymore. I laughed. "Since when has fear ever stopped you?" "Since my daughter me back," he said. We went, of course. We shared the stage. He spoke first, brief, measured, heartfelt. "I 11 thought strength was silence," he said. "Then my daughter showed me. It's knowing when to speak and when to listen. When it was my turn, I simply said, forgiveness is the longest mission of all, and sometimes it's the only one worth finishing, those that can." That night back at the hotel, I found him sitting by the window again, staring at the city lights. "You did well today," I said. He smiled faintly. "So did you." He paused, then added, "Your mother would have been proud." I nodded. She already was. He looked down at his hands. "You think she forgave me too?" "I think she never stopped." He let out a shaky breath, leaned back and closed his eyes. "Then, maybe I can rest now." "Not yet," I said with a cry. "You still owe me one more thing." He opened one eye. "What's that?" "A proper salute. Before you retire from fatherhood." He laughed quietly, then lifted his hand, one last time. "Yes, ma'am." I returned it standing tall in the dim hotel room, the city glowing beyond. Her father, no ranks, just peace. The last time I saw my father, it was sunrise. He stood in the front yard, barefoot in the damp grass, his cane resting against his leg. The flag caught the wind, just as he raised his hand. The motion was steady, deliberate. No audience, no camera crew, just a man returning something he'd nearly forgotten, his dignity. That morning, we were leaving for the dedication of the Holbrook Initiative, our new veteran foundation, built out of the same outreach center where our story began. It wasn't my idea, it was his. He said if we're lucky, we get one last mission before the lights go out. This is mine. The hall was filled with faces I didn't recognize, veterans, families, young recruits. On the stage, saw a banner, the Holbrook Initiative, Honor Restored Through Service. When they called our names, we walked together. My father's steps were slow, but he refused help. The audience, it wasn't for medals, it was for endurance. At the podium, his throat gripping the sides for balance. "I used to believe honor came from command," he began, "but my daughter taught me it comes from humility. I led men into war. She led men home." He paused, eyes shining. "The world calls her commander. I just call her my second chance." I didn't cry until the room did. When it was my turn, I stepped up beside him. 2 years ago, I said, "My father gave me an ultimatum. Serve his wife or leave his house." I chose silence. I thought I was walking away for good, but life has a strange way of calling us back. When pride breaks, when forgiveness becomes the only thing left to build on, I looked over the audience, most of them older Americans, gray veterans sitting shoulder to shoulder. All carry wars that never make the news. Some happen overseas, some happen at home, but every one of them needs a ceasefire. The crowd was still. Even the air seemed to listen. I turned to him. "Dad, you 11 told me. A soldier's worth is in the corners. How we fold, how we stand, how we finish. Today, I think we both cornered." "Yes, ma'am." Later, after the ceremony, we walked through the foundation's new hall. Photos of veterans, quotes from families, a small plaque at the entrance. It read, "Dedicated to those who lost their way and those who helped them home. In memory of Sarah Holbrook." He stopped and touched the plaque. "Your mother always wanted a home full of purpose." He said she got one. I replied, "And you built it?" He looked at me, voice quiet. "No, we built it." Outside, the wind limbled through the flags lining the walkway. Each one represented a family. We'd helped men and women who'd found new footing through the initiative. Pride filled me, but it wasn't the sharp kind. It was steady, clean, earned. A few months later, I found a letter on my desk in his handwriting. "Avery, if you're reading this, I probably took my final flight. Don't mourn. A soldier's duty is to finish the mission, and ours ended the moment you forgave me. Remember, command with compassion, stand when it's hardest, and never salute without meaning it. You didn't just save me. You restored the name Holbrook. Love, Dad." I folded it and slipped it into my uniform pocket. His words felt like the final order of a long campaign. Simple, complete. That evening, I returned to the center. The sun was dipping low. the same golden light that always reminded me of deployment sunset. I walked to the flagpole, straightened the fabric where the wind had tangled it, and saluted. Daughter, but as a woman who finally understood that revenge had never the mission, redemption was to those who've ever carried silence's armor. Call home, even if pride says you can't. To those who've hurt someone trying to love them, find your way back before it's too late. And to every veteran, parent, son, or daughter watching this, forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it redeems it. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because sometimes the strongest salute is the one you give after the war ends.